Forza Horizon 5 is a beautiful vehicular sandbox with a ton of content, and yet, to many, it never felt very new or innovative. Instead, more like a new coat of paint on an older formula, with some calling it Horizon 4.5, as the two games felt so similar. Now, I recently returned to Horizon 4 myself, and realized during my time playing that I had actually forgotten just how many features we used to have that are now missing. So today, I want to look at all those features with a level head, try to answer why they might have gotten removed, and give my thoughts on whether or not I feel it was the right call. After all, not every removed feature is a bad thing. Sometimes it's good to cut the dead weight and refocus the experience. I'm also not going to cover subjective things like the soundtrack, where it's obviously different and some people might like Horizon 4's more, but this video is about features that have been cut from Horizon 5, not trying to judge which game did a certain thing better. I also want to be clear that this is not meant to be a hit piece against Horizon 5 or anything. It does a lot that Horizon 4 never did, and especially lately, post-launch support has been picking up some strong speed. But I think it could be fun to take a deeper look at just what got left behind along the way, and show players new to the franchise what they might have missed out on, for better or worse. So, let's look at everything we had in Horizon 4 that's gone in Horizon 5. Now, the feature that I'm sure you are all thinking 5 seconds into this video is, of course, the absence of ranked online racing. It's a big one, we've talked about it before, and I actually think there are more important things than ranked missing in Horizon 5, but first, we've got to cover ranked online racing. The ranked mode in Horizon 4 had an elo system that scored you based on your placement in races and tried to group you with other players of a similar skill level. You would have to do qualifying matches to get your initial league rating score, then throughout each season could increase that score to climb league levels, which started at 20 and moved all the way up to League 1, or even Grandmaster. At the end of each season, you would then get rewards based on your rank, and the higher ranks had more exclusive rewards like unique clothing items or chat phrases alongside valuable cars. Now, I'll say right away that this system was far from perfect and had plenty of issues we'll talk about in a sec, but that being said, looking at it now, it's shocking remembering just how fully featured this was, and how rewarding it could be, because you got every rank's reward up to the highest rank you achieved that season. This meant that if you could qualify even just roughly in the middle, say around rank 10, every month you could do a single ranked championship to get all these rewards. I often talk about how in Horizon 5 there aren't enough prestige awards, things you can show off that are harder to get, and this system offered a solution to that years ago. It's not something unfair like a powerful car only awarded to Grandmaster PvP players, but just a simple cosmetic you can wear to show off your accomplishment. I think Horizon 5 needed more stuff like this, not less of it. Now, like I said, ranked racing was not without its problems. The elo system, especially early on, didn't seem to accurately reward players based on their skill, and the penalty system, which wasn't even in at launch, wasn't quite the best. And because, of course, this was competitive racing, people did anything and everything to win. This meant ranked was often full of ramming and griefing, and especially towards the top, there was also little variety in car builds, as most players just took the small handful of meta cars. These issues, paired with some others, meant that ranked mode had a pretty small pool of regular players. Horizon 4 was a huge game, of course, with hundreds of thousands of active players, but there was just so much to do in the game besides ranked that it ended up being a pretty niche segment of the player base, and that hurt the experience even more. So I say all this to make sure we all have our nostalgia goggles properly calibrated here. Ranked was far from perfect, but Playground still made the wrong call removing it from Horizon 5. And this was an intentional decision. Playground removed Ranked in an attempt to cultivate a more casual racing atmosphere separate from motorsport. Unfortunately, I feel like this backfired. See, one of the nice things about ranked modes is that it also means there are unranked modes. It separates the players who want to compete from the players who are just jumping in for fun. Unranked racing in Horizon 4 was often more casual and cleaner than Horizon 5's single online mode, because in Horizon 5 you have players of all skill levels and all motivations in the same lobby, whereas in Horizon 4 most players in unranked were there to get away from the competitive, aggressive, super meta ranked online. So, ranked online should have been improved, not removed. Now, honestly, I know this topic has been beaten to death, even on this own channel, and we have a lot to cover here today, so I do want to push on to another online racing feature we no longer have in Horizon 5 that is a bit related to ranked racing, and that is team racing. In Horizon 4, we had both ranked and unranked team online racing. And for what it's worth, this is actually all we had on release, and players were pissed about the lack of free-for-all. But we did eventually get that back. It's weird to remember, though, that in Horizon 4, you could queue up with a team of 6 drivers and compete in ranked matches against other teams. I mean, it was Team Wars before Team Wars. Just imagine if they had instead improved these features for Horizon 5, allowing things like in-game team management tools and challenging specific other teams. Instead, they killed it off and let the community pick up the pieces. Likely because of the fact that players were bitter about it being the only mode in at launch, and that, paired with the smaller community, probably meant it was underused and cut for Horizon 5. While we're on the topic of teams, let's talk about Horizon 4's ability to manually organize teams within convoys. This one really affects me as a streamer, and is actually the reason I'm making this video in the first place. During many of my live streams in Horizon 5, we do team races, where we pit cars against each other, for example, Mitsubishis versus Subarus. We've done dozens of these, and each time we do them, we have to manually keep track of who's on what team, make sure everyone's in the right car, and manually score the results because there's no way to let drivers pick teams. So we just run the event as a free-for-all and don't know how each team is doing until after the race when we screenshot the results and have one of my mods figure out scoring on a spreadsheet and then keep track of that across multiple races. We still have a ton of fun with it, but it's a terribly inconvenient workaround, and you know what we had in Horizon 4? Custom adventures where we could manually select up to 10 events for a private championship and then manually adjust teams between blue and red drivers. The game would then automatically track scoring, let us know who was on what team and how the teams were doing during the races, and then give us final results at the end of the championship. It was all done in-game in Horizon 4, and none of that exists now. This one shocks me, because to me, Horizon is supposed to be the social and more casual fun car game, where I think stuff like this should be celebrated and encouraged, and I struggle to see why these features were removed. The only answer I can give here, again, is that perhaps it was just underused in Horizon 4, and they figured it would be easier and not affect too many players to just cut it instead of fixing it up for Horizon 5. It is important while we talk about this to remember that the Horizon community was much smaller in Horizon 4. You didn't have these dozens of massive Discord servers regularly running custom events that used these features. So I think they just made the call based on that and misjudged how much Horizon's community would grow for FH5. Now, before we move away from online racing entirely, I do want to bring up one thing that I think many players don't miss from Horizon 4, Freeroam Rush. This was an interesting feature where in between your online championship races, there were Freeroam Rush events where you raced through the open world. No checkpoints, no set routes, just beeline it across the map from the end of the previous event to the start of the next. Freeroam Rush counted as much towards your championship score as the real races. And this, in my opinion, was the real problem with the feature. You could be an amazing S1 road racer, but if you couldn't dodge trees flying through the forest at 200 miles an hour, it didn't really matter. This also heavily discouraged the already underpowered rear-wheel drive builds. As your car didn't need to be just good at racing, every car you took online also kinda had to be good at cross-country, which further promoted the all-wheel drive meta. So this was definitely not loved by many, and they did end up removing Freeroam Rush entirely from road racing championships. That said, the fact that they still counted towards your overall score in rally events just felt wrong to me. Freeroam Rush should have, if anything, just been an unscored fun break between races. And for what it's worth, that's pretty much exactly what we get in Horizon 5's Tour mode, and I like how that works. So here's to one feature that I definitely don't miss from Horizon 4. Now let's keep the missing online features theme going here and talk Forzathon Live. This was a sort of precursor to Horizon Arcade. Forzathon Live events took place every hour on the hour and consisted of 3 selected PR stunts that had a group achievement goal. You had a time limit, and once you completed one event, you could move on to the next, each rewarding Forzathon points. Again, these are similar to Horizon 5's Arcade, but I feel it's different enough to be considered a separate feature. For starters, only one popped up once an hour. That meant that when one went live, it didn't feel like spam or clutter. It was something you'd actually decide to do, and in many cases, players were more inclined to do them because they had that more limited availability. On top of this, car meets regularly formed in preparation for the events to start, and people even built special Forzathon Live cars that kind of worked as a jack-of-all-trades PR stunt car. This was mine. I mean, the culture around these pre-event car meets was so strong that I based one of my car review scores on it. The style points score was essentially based around how cool the car would be if you showed up to a Forzathon Live with it. Now, in Horizon 5, that culture is completely gone. Horizon 5 arcades were pretty much DOA, especially with the early bugs, and I don't think I've ever completed more than 3 of them in my entire career. I think instead they should have leaned into the car meet culture, and every hour had a themed car meet, using the in-game categories, and then rolled that into themed PR stunts. For example, theme the car meet to retro sports cars from Japan, and have players do 3 drift zones, or limit it to S1 buggies and do a trailblazer into a couple danger signs. There are lots of ways they could have innovated on this feature style that I think would have promoted a better community feel within the game. This is a case where the feature needed some work. Forzathon Live events were not perfect either, and I was even critical of them at the time, but I feel they just missed the mark by replacing them with Horizon Arcade. Now, speaking of missing the mark, let's talk about another feature that was definitely not well loved at Horizon 4's release, but is now something I kind of wish we had back: Rivals Challenges. So Rivals, as we know it, lets us race on any track in perfect road conditions in any car with leaderboards sorted by class. In Horizon 4, however, at launch, we didn't have that. Instead, we had Rivals Challenges, a single specific Rivals leaderboard with either a set car or set category and a specific weather and season. You can think of it kind of like a permanent monthly Rivals. This was an attempt to focus the Rivals experience into fewer and more competitive and unique challenges, which was a good idea in its own right. But removing class rivals altogether to fit those challenges in was not the right call. Luckily, class rivals did come back after launch, but the negative reaction to rivals challenges stayed, and I believe that's what caused them to be removed entirely from Horizon 5. Although this was a cool idea, and I think there's some potential for a slightly revamped version of these challenges in Horizon 5, we do already have plenty to compete in, with the permanent class boards and monthly rivals, so I feel like Rivals challenges don't add enough unique gameplay to justify the added bloat. So as we wrap up the kind of online/multiplayer category here, I've got to say that as a whole, this was the biggest area where I feel Horizon 5 dropped the ball. We saw the complete removal of quite a few important features, including some minor QOL ones I didn't even bring up, like the ability to swap live sessions, and the features we got to replace old ones just didn't really pan out, and seemed to show a lack of understanding of what the game and community needed going into the next title. Strong online features foster strong communities, and strong communities keep games alive. This is an area that the Horizon franchise really should be excelling in. Horizon should be the flagship social car community game, and I feel like they just keep taking one step forward and one step back. Horizon 5 isn't the first time we've seen this, and it's so easy to look to even older Horizon games and see things like officially supported in-game car meets, private custom open world lobbies, and significantly better in-game club features. I do think Horizon 5 has advanced in many significant ways, but the continued lack of improvement for online racing and missed understanding of what social features players want is, in my opinion, the biggest thing hurting the franchise, more than anything else we'll talk about in this video. But now, let's change pace and talk about some single-player features that we no longer have in Horizon 5, starting with businesses. This was a kinda cool feature of Horizon 4 that took stories and themed them around the fact that you're running a business. The big gameplay hook here was that as you progressed through each story, you earned more and more passive income. This would be earned even when you weren't playing the game, so if you maxed out all the businesses, you could log into a nice chunk of money every single time you played. This feature is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think the player base now is very split between wanting more grind or more progression versus wanting things to be even easier than they are now with less FOMO. And admittedly, I very much see both sides of the argument. I think the main argument for businesses, though, is the question of how new players should make money in Horizon 5. Most people will tell you one of a few things. Either just play the game, because really anything you do in-game earns you credits, or they might tell you to AFK grind skill points, or even get lucky with user-generated content to get a bunch of downloads, which does pay out every day, kinda like a business. None of these options are great in my opinion though, because they're pretty indirect or not guaranteed. On the flip side, in Horizon 4, you could directly tell new players to go play and max out all the businesses. And then every day they logged in, they'd be hundreds of thousands of credits richer. It was a direct path to a good amount of daily income. But it was passive, and meant that for regular players you were usually even more drowned in credits than we are now in Horizon 5, meaning that monetary progression was even less of a concern. So I think this was removed to balance credits in Horizon 5, and put more of an emphasis on user-generated content. You know, running a quote-unquote real business of making graphics or racetracks or tunes that get downloads, which gets money. And I actually love that concept, but I wish it came with better search and sort and management features, but that's its own topic and we won't get into it here. I don't think many players really miss the businesses too much from Horizon 4, but as is becoming the theme here in this video, I do feel like this could have been innovated on instead of just removed. Adjusting Horizon 5's credit payouts across the board and having something like endless procedurally generated missions to earn income through a variety of different businesses could have given players some good gameplay motivation to earn direct, reliable credits. Alright, now our next feature is going to enter a bit into the subjective category, but I gotta talk about seasons. Seasons were added in Horizon 4, and then heavily scaled back in Horizon 5. For those unaware, the open world seasonal changes in FH4 were vastly larger than the ones we see today. In spring, everything came to life, the whole world was green, there were puddles all over and fields of flowers bloomed. In the summer, we had plenty of dry open road to set PR stunts on, and in fall, it rained almost every day and the trees turned beautiful colors and dropped piles of leaves onto the road, and during the winter, the lake froze over, and the whole map would get covered in snow. And there's the big stinger. Everyone complained about it in Horizon 4, and now everyone misses it in Horizon 5. The Horizon 5 seasons were scaled back so far that I regularly hear about how players can't distinguish between the seasons or don't even realize the feature still exists at all. And I do think this was largely due to player feedback. See, the seasons were a great concept, a phenomenal way to shake up the game world on a weekly basis and keep things feeling fresh. But different seasons, of course, brought different driving conditions, and that made some things much harder when it was snowing or raining all the time. For example, going for high scores on PR stunts was basically off the table in winter, or even during the rain, and it rained a lot. This was the UK after all. So a loud portion of the player base basically didn't play the game during winter because it didn't cater to their playstyle. In contrast, Horizon 5's choice of location and seasonal variety does make sure that driving conditions are roughly consistent throughout every season, and that is good. It's a direct answer to player feedback, but it does neuter a lot of the original intended variety that seasons brought to the world. And I had hoped that the evolving world changes would be more permanent and pick up the slack there for keeping the world feeling fresh, but sadly that just hasn't really been the case, and even most evolving world events go relatively unnoticed by a large portion of the player base. So, was it a good call to heavily cut down on seasonal variety in order to ensure a more consistent driving experience? Honestly, as someone who loved winter, I think they made the right call in the end. Sure, like anything, it's easy to imagine improvements, like a better evolving world to replace that lack of variety, or maybe just giving us some more snowy areas to play around in during winter, but in the end, I think the more subtle seasonal changes are the way to go moving forward. And I do want to point out here before we move on, this nice little UI feature we used to have that showed the weather and temperature. This was, of course, a minor touch, but it did help connect you a bit to the game world and made it feel more real in a way. And I think having this back in Horizon 5, even with its smaller weather changes, would still be a nice touch. Now, speaking of smaller features, I do want to briefly discuss beauty spots. These were points of interest on the map that, when found, would let you enter a small cutscene that gave you a nice view and a bit of voiceover about the location. I'll be honest, and I think most players probably forgot these existed. They were kinda neat finding them for the first time, but they offered no real gameplay or replayability, and ended up just being map clutter once you found them all. So I'm okay with beauty spots being cut from Horizon 5. I think that was the right call. Alright, now let's talk about star cards. This was a post-launch feature added to Horizon 4 that asked players to complete specific challenges within categories in order to earn sometimes pretty rare rewards, like clothing items, badges, or even the Forza Edition Ford Capri, one of the rarest cars in the game. So I think it's easy to see here that this has largely just been replaced by things like the new badge system and, of course, accolades. And I think that's totally fair. I like the new badge system, and I like the accolade system. We now have tons of badges to earn and accolades to complete, with more being added almost every month. So was it the right call to transition star cards into these features? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty much a linear improvement of the gameplay. I do wish, though, that we had something super rare to shoot for again, like the Ford Capri FE in Horizon 4. And now, for our final feature that we're going to discuss today, it's time to talk about the Horizon Backstage. This was another feature added long after launch that gave players a more reliable way to earn rare seasonal cars. Here's how it worked. Every week, the player base would vote in-game between two cars that could potentially get added to the Backstage. and the winner of the vote would then join the ever-increasing list of rare cars you could only purchase with Backstage Passes. Backstage Passes were earned through the festival playlist, so they were still limited, but this was an amazing way to get cars that you might have missed out on the first time around, while still keeping them somewhat rare. I think many other players absolutely loved this feature, and I'll be honest, I do expect and certainly hope this returns in some form for Horizon 5. We're at a point now in Horizon 5's life where new players are missing out on a big list of seasonal cars that rarely return to the playlist, if at all. So you've often got to try your luck in the auction house and be able to fork out the millions of credits you might need. So restarting the Horizon Backstage in some form, maybe with a new cool way to earn passes, would be an awesome addition to Horizon 5 at this point in its life. And with that, folks, we are at the end of our list, so I want to answer as a whole if Playground made the right call to cut what they did from Horizon 4, and honestly, almost everything here makes sense to me. It's easy to understand cutting underused features without much gameplay, it's easy to see where they replaced a feature with something a little different and often better, and it's easy to see how much Horizon 5 has added that Horizon 4 never had, or had but in a much smaller way. But when it comes to online, social, and racing features, which I think should be one of the biggest priorities and sources of innovation for Horizon, they just missed the mark again. Forza Horizon is still the best car sandbox on the market, but the community is ready for better racing and better social gameplay. So here's to hoping Horizon 6 finally delivers that. Guys, thank you all for watching the video. If there's anything you missed from Horizon 4, maybe something I didn't even cover, please let me know. And let me know if you agree about whether or not Playground made the right or wrong call in certain areas. You know, everyone's experience with these games is different, and I love hearing yours. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.